Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast. It's our signing day special. We're doing quick video, audio recruiting capsules on all of the signees for Ohio State's 2023 recruiting class. Signing day finally here. I am Mark Givler. I've got Kevin Noon with me. We're going to be doing these all together here. Hopefully, it'll be for the Buckeyes. It'll be at least 20, maybe more. But we're going to do capsule for all these guys. Today, or this version here, will be Noah Rogers. We're doing the top 100 prospect wide receiver out of Rolesville, North Carolina. This was a big get for Brian Hartline. They were able to get him, back in the summer, early springish, and this was a kid we went and saw in Rolesville. Made quite a detour on our southern swing. As we look back on that trip, just as one time we were able to size up Noah in person, Kevin, what did you take away, I guess, from Noah from our time at the high school?
Noah is somebody that, there wasn't a lot of talk. And if you talk to a lot of the experts, while Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis are your 5 stars in this class, and Noah's sitting there at 4, there are people that believe that Noah may end up being the one who emerges out of this class as being the guy. Very, very quiet guy. When we were talking to him during Southern Swing, he, was just a little shy. I don't think a lot of people got out there to do a lot of interviews with him. Very interested in fashion, which, every time I've seen him on campus at Ohio State, he's had a new outfit on. I mean, he's going to do well, I think, in terms of being able to do the team walk and everything else. But 6'2", 195, he's somebody who can do everything. We had the chance to talk to his coach, and I won't get into all of that. I figured you would. And this Rolesville program churns out some solid wide receivers, and there was no doubt that Noah's probably going to be the best of the bunch.
Yeah, I do want to kind of mention something you were talking about there a minute ago. They don't have similar games, in my opinion, to who I'm going to mention, but there are some Jackson Smith and Jigba vibes to him in the sense that for really like the entirety, but really for the majority, and in some cases, depending on the service, the entirety of Jackson Smith and Jigba's recruiting process, he was not the highest ranked Ohio State wide receiver commit. In fact, he spent most of the recruiting process as the 3rd highest ranked Ohio State wide receiver commit in his class. And there was always this kind of undertone around him that he was actually the best of the group. And there is that undertone from some of the same people around Noah Rogers. There's an excitement level there. I know other college coaches have even mentioned to me that they think this might be the best guy Ohio State is going to sign a wide receiver in this class. So there's some interesting parallels there. They're very different players in terms of body types and how they kind of play. But Noah is a really impressive athlete at 6'2", 195. And here we're going to throw the film on. Just a guy who can get vertical, get down the field, just go over top right there. I mean, look at that catch. I mean, that's just unbelievable body control. But he is the type of player who is just a one-on-one matchup nightmare on the outside. And he's not a guy I expect to play much in the slot at Ohio State. I know they like to cross-train their guys, so I'm not saying he'll never line up there, but he's one of those big outside athletic jump ball, almost like an AJ Brown for like an NFL guy type of comparison, type of receivers. And I don't know if I'm ready to anoint him number 1 in this class at the receiver position among his peers, but I can certainly see why people feel that way. Just a tremendous talent, very quiet, reserved. In that regard, there's some Marvin Harrison Jr. to him as well, Kevin. Wouldn't you agree, as far as just kind of the way you said, the interest in fashion, kind of how they carry themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and say that I'm not saying that either of them have an arrogance to them, but there's a quiet confidence to each of them. And while Noah probably hasn't necessarily found himself, it wasn't necessarily a case that Marvin Harrison Jr. was not Marvin Harrison Jr. when he first set foot on campus. I mean, he was always the hard worker. He was always the guy that was not going to take anything for granted despite coming from an NFL bloodline. And you look at Noah Rogers, and he's somebody too that just he enjoys the football, but he has other, other pursuits. I mean, when we asked him a lot of questions during like our 5 questions and things, I mean, he very thoughtful kid. I mean, just a lot of deep thought. Didn't want to just fire off answers. I mean, sometimes these kids have been told how great they are and they just kind of ham and egg it. But I was really impressed with just how cerebral Noah was throughout the whole process, and for a kid who just doesn't talk all that much. I mean, how many interviews have we seen out there with him? Not many. We had to go outside of Raleigh, Durham to go get him ourselves. I think he's just going to be a kid that's going to handle his business.
Yeah, I look at this class at the receiver position as a incredibly deep group. I do think I know, and I know Brian Hartline has signed some really amazing wide receiver classes already in his brief kind of stint here as wide receivers coach. But I feel like the depth in this one is maybe the best. I feel like all these guys have the traits and the mindset, and Noah, I think, just yes, the way he carries himself, I think, is really impressive. He's not one of those, I know the receiver position can produce maybe a higher per capita diva rate than other positions on the field. I don't see that in Noah. Um, Quite honestly, he's kind of the vertical threat that maybe they haven't quite had this year. That's I think maybe where I think he's most intriguing early on is, again, this is a guy who can run by you vertically, but can also, it's not just speed in the vertical passing game. It's that 6'2" frame. And even if he's covered, you can still kind of throw it up there. And he's a guy who can come down with it and doesn't necessarily need to have that, you know, 5 yards of separation where, some of the shorter receivers, they need to kind of separate more. Noah's got that ability to go up and make those contested plays. Just unbelievable concentration, hands, body control. I think in this class, he's maybe their best guy in terms of those downfield type of plays. It was interesting kind of looking back on his recruiting process, which we'll do with all these guys. Just a lot of people, like I said, I had an SEC coach tell me very briefly before we went to the high school back in May that even though he was trying to land Noah to go to his SEC program, he thought NC State was going to be the team to beat. He said, I'm speaking for him. He's like, we want him, and we know Brian Hartline's a great recruiter, and Brian Hartline wants him. But he's like, I just think he's going to stay. He's a homebody, and so we saw kind of that in action. We talked to his coach about that a little bit, but then we kind of sat down with Noah and we're like, yeah, like we can see why you would think that. He certainly does, like, he is very chill. He's not like a big personality. He's not, he's not like maybe a social butterfly or whatever that needs to be in the spotlight or needs to have attention or go out and do things. But I also think there is a fit there, though. He does remind me of the Marvin Harrisons, the Emeka Ibukas, those types of kids that Ohio State has landed that just kind of, they just like to go do their thing and they don't really say a lot. And they're not super flashy, but they just, they just want to focus on football and school and kind of be left alone. And that, sometimes I think you get the homebody sentiment from that, but I just, I don't know. I just think maybe his quiet demeanor misled people on that. But either way, I mean, great recruiting job by Brian Hartline, right?
Absolutely. I mean, not everybody's Garrett Wilson in terms of being the talker. I mean, Chris Olave was much more chill. Jackson Smith and Jigba much more chill. So you're gonna have your guys that are going to be vocal. You're gonna have your guys that are going to be like, I'm just going to show it out on the field. Noah's that type of guy, and yeah, kudos to Brian Hartline, kudos to Keenan Bailey, because Keenan Bailey is such a huge help in terms of this recruitment, and now he's being rewarded with the tight end position at Ohio State. Will be one of the 10 counted coaches until the NC2A finally gets around to changing some of those count rules. Brian Hartline just continues to go out and get guy after guy after guy. And while it probably is not fair to say that Brian Hartline is out there selecting players rather than recruiting players. That's kind of always been the old joke in the industry. When you reach the top, when you're the Nick Saban of the world, you're selecting and you're not recruiting. But it certainly feels like Brian Hartline is kind of selecting. I mean, there were other guys. One I can't remember names off the top of my head. Kind of once they're off the board, I don't remember them anymore. A guy who from the West Coast who went to Notre Dame, who kind of seemed like he was waiting to see what was going on with some of these guys. And then Brian Hartline is just going to continue that on with 2024, Jeremiah Smith, and you're just going to have to stay tuned for what the next couple names are going to be. But I think the class is going to be pretty special.
Yeah, just another example here of Brian Hartline going really wherever he wants at this point. Going into North Carolina, I think people kind of scoff at North Carolina as far as like, oh, well, it shouldn't be that hard. It has not been easy to recruit North Carolina over the years. Those kids are loyal to home. North Carolina State, they get a lot of those types of kids, or you're fighting a Clemson or something like that for a kid. It's not far down the road. So this was an underrated recruiting job, I thought, by Brian Hartline. And I think this is a kid who is probably not getting as much excitement around him from the fan base as maybe some other guys. And I think a large part of that is he doesn't do a lot of interviews. He's not on social media very often. I mean, he has a Twitter account, but he's not on there, every day, kind of throwing hot takes around and posting, edits and things like that. So he's just kind of goes about his business. And I think that's kind of allowed him to stay under the radar as he kind of likes it. So, but yeah, I think this is a big pickup for them. I think this will be a guy who does very well at Ohio State. This is one of my maybe top guys in the class, I think, overall, actually. But definitely a guy, I think, if you talk about the 2 or 3 maybe most slept on kids in this class, I think he would be in that one. So, all right, that'll be it for this one. We have a bunch more of these coming, so stick with us here. We'll be posting them to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast feed. So wherever you download your podcasts, it'll be in there. And also at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, as well as on BuckeyeHuddle.com. We'll have a little written piece on BuckeyeHuddle.com to go with all these as well. So hopefully everyone enjoys these, but we're going to do them for everyone. And we will catch you on the next one.